Welcome to the first ever Arthan's Women at Work Masterclass. I am Matangi, a part of the Women at Work team at Arthan, and also your host for today's session. This would be a masterclass on job search in the social impact sector, and Ridhika Bagga, who is here with us, should be leading the session. A quick introduction to Ridhika. She is a manager in the talent acquisition team at Arthan and works with job seekers and employers in the social sector. So it's no wonder we are doing our inaugural session with Ridhika today. I'll allow her to set more context as we go along, but I'm super stoked to be doing this session and having all of you. Over to you, Ridhika.
Thank you, Matangi, for the introduction, and thank you everyone present here today. Um, we are at literally at the last working hour for some of us of the week, and it's been a long, hot week here for us. So thank you all so much for coming on this call. Sorry, and I hope the session is helpful for everyone. We decided to do the session on job search in the impact space and center it for women because we understand, and the kind of inputs we've got from everyone is that this is a very important topic for whether it is you already being in the sector and looking to grow to another role, whether you're coming from the corporate sector and looking to transition into the sector, or whether it is just you coming back after a long break. I think a lot of what will be discussed today will be relevant for all these three and beyond categories of people. So a little bit about Arthan. We are an organization in the impact sector, and we work with other organizations in the impact sector through capacity building, consulting support in areas of human capital, strategy, and thought leadership. We support such organizations by aligning their organizational strategy to talent, building dialogues, and through thought leadership work. And our thought leadership work mostly contains knowledge creation, workshops like these, conferences, research activities, and so on. Over the next 1 hour, we have centered this session around a few topics. We ran a survey a few weeks ago before before the session was announced to kind of take into account what is our audience thinking when they think about job search, what are some aspects of the entire process that really matter to them, what are some challenges that they experience. So we've tried to center this session around that. I would be walking you all through a broad map of the social sector to kind of give you a sense of what is the length and breadth of the sector, what is the scope of opportunities here, what are some challenges that we experience in the sector. We will then deep dive into how to go about a job search. We will share a few approaches with you, some tips to keep in mind while going through the entire hiring job search process. And at the center of all this, we will be keeping LinkedIn as a tool of looking for jobs and getting that next opportunity. Finally, we will have a Q&A session for everyone. We would focus more on this. The idea is that we divide the next hour into 30 minutes each, where we focus on Q&A, interaction, perspectives, ideas for the last 30 minutes. Before we start the session, we have a quick poll. So I would request my team to launch the poll, and we can spend a few minutes over that. I think we should be good to go. Just a couple of questions. Starting with our key survey findings, we focused on broadly two areas in this survey where we wanted to understand challenges and what aspects of the job search process really matter the most. The biggest highlight in the challenges that job seekers experience in the job search process are lack of awareness about opportunities in the social sector, tailoring applications to match job requirements. So how are you positioning yourself to a job description? And finally, identifying opportunities in one's area of specialization. I think to a very large extent, these 3 points are kind of interrelated to each other. And that's why we thought of centering this session around LinkedIn, because we feel that all 3 aspects of the job search process, all these challenges can be tackled through LinkedIn. We also have a point on understanding upskilling requirements, which is something that we will be focusing on in one of the future sessions. Key aspects of the job search process that kind of affect everyone our networking strategy, personal brand and outreach, and navigating online jobs. I think these three stand out the most. We again, linking this back to LinkedIn, a lot of this can be tackled through LinkedIn, and we will be talking more about that in the session. Finally, the other half of the aspects of job search are right from your hiring process, right? The end-to-end process, right from your CV, cover letter to interview prep, and to finally managing salary expectations and communicating your salary expectations in the interview process. We have something on that too. A lot of our conversations, I'm expecting a lot of our conversations in the Q&A session also to be centered around this. So we'll start off with a sense of the social impact space. Broadly, the space can be categorized into the following structures. So you would find organizations categorized into these 6 main categories. We will start off with NGOs and non-profit organizations, which probably form the foundation of the impact space. As an outsider to the sector, one would think that the social impact space constitutes of the NGOs and non-profits that are working on ground and directly with communities and beneficiaries for impact, which is true to some extent. I think a lot of ideas of impact for organizations, for employers also arise from here. But to say that the social impact space primarily only consists of NGOs and non-profits would be not true at all. We also have social enterprises, which are organizations that are working towards impact, but with a for-profit business model. This is simply put, like working towards creating impact while also using certain business strategies to promote impact. The next category of organizations we have are foundations and grant-making organizations, which are your typical philanthropies that work with small and mid-level NGOs and sometimes even social enterprises, provide them with funding towards creating certain impact. So NGOs and social enterprises have programs that they need funding for, and they go to these foundation and grant-making organizations for the same. An extension of such organizations are your impact investment organizations, who invest in organizations and measure their ROI in terms of impact and not in revenue. So me as an organization, if I'm funded by an impact investment organizations, my deliverables for utilizing their funds are on the lines of how much impact I'm creating, how wide is the impact, how are my beneficiaries benefiting from the kind of work that I'm doing using those funds. Finally, we also have consulting organizations in the impact space, which might just be very similar in their approach to your big 3, big 4 organizations that you have in the private sector, except these are organizations that are working again with a very strong focus on impact. Different kinds of consulting organizations offer different kinds of services. Some consulting organizations offer services with certain subject matter expertise. So you have consulting orgs that are providing services on PR and communications for other organizations in the impact space. Arthan's one stream of Arthan's work is providing human capital consulting support to organizations in the impact space. You might have organizations that are doing the same in education, in healthcare. So not just providing a service, but also knowledge expertise. You also have consulting organizations that work with government and other larger autonomous body to kind of like plan and implement certain government policies. So different kind of organizations are structured differently. And an extension to this would be different kinds of thematic areas that these organizations might work in. So you might have an NGO that is working in climate, a foundation or a grant-making organization that is only funding organizations that work in gender. Like I said, consulting organizations that provide services in PR and communications, or consulting knowledge support in agricultural organizations. You also have organizations that might be working in an intersectional way. So someone working at the intersection of gender and education, or climate and agriculture. So when you think about the structure in which organizations are and the kind of thematic areas that they can work in, this is not even an exhaustive list. You would think that the permutation and the combinations kind of provides a very wide and large scope for opportunities and areas of problem solving in the sector. And that is the case. Recently at Davos, the World Economic Forum announced that there is an unmet need for 76 million new jobs just in agriculture, education, and other ESG jobs. Climate and ESG is a very up and coming industry. And 76 million jobs as a number is just mind-boggling, and these jobs are unmet. So there is clearly scope for growth and opportunities in the sector. But while there is the problem of jobs not being fulfilled, there is also a problem of funding issues that lead to layoffs and hiring freezes. We might have heard a lot about smaller organizations not able to sustain themselves. There is a whole different conversation going on about the kind of challenges that exist with FCRA funding. Rules are being updated, some are conducive, some are not. But things like hiring freezes and layoffs tend to happen even in the social sector as they do in the private sector. And this can be a very intimidating situation to be in for anyone. I want to talk a little bit about the kind of mindsets and attitudes one should keep in mind if one is affected by a situation like this. I think the first and the foremost thing to do is process what has really happened. It is a matter of fact that something like this, a layoff has happened, but one needs to accept that this is not a reflection of one's performance or one's worth in the job market. It is something that is not in your control, and it is something that that has happened to many others with you. It is also important that you are not losing sight of the bigger picture. Layoffs are almost always temporary; they come and go. There is really you can expect them, but you can't do much about them. But layoffs should not let you get derailed from your long-term goals and aspirations for your career, for your professional growth. And an important mindset to have at a time like this is one that is positive and one that encourages growth. So how can the setback really be converted into an opportunity for growth? How can you use the time that is created because of a layoff in upskilling yourself, in spending very single-minded attention and time towards looking for a new job? These are some things that one should ideally keep in mind if they have been in a situation of a layoff or a hiring freeze. I think this is a great segue into how to look for a job, whether it is through a layoff or it is just through growth. And we will be diving right into that, but we will have pause for another poll for a minute. So when you're starting your job search process, often there might be times when we are starting our job search process under frustration, under a compulsion. But the idea is that you take stock of things first. You understand that there is a certain approach that you need to take, and you need to look for a job in a systematic way. Something that I advise to all job seekers who come to us for opportunities is to figure out what category, and this is just an example of an approach. There are different types of approaches, but the one that I want to talk about is the specialist and the generalist course of things. So someone would identify as a specialist when they come with a depth of knowledge in a particular subject matter area or domain, and they come with a niche expertise. So it could be like someone specializing in monitoring and evaluation, or someone could be a research specialist in gender or healthcare. Whereas on the other end of the spectrum are generalists who come with a broader range of knowledge with specific specialization within that broader range of skills. So general management and support functions are typically where you see generalists. And consultants are often considered to be generalists with a range of specialization with the kind of projects that they pick up. So they come with a lot of transferable skills that they can apply across different kinds of domains and thematic areas, but certain skill sets that they have can be applied to all of these thematic areas. Similarly, HR generalists, for example, work in the broader HR function as a support function, but they might be specializing in hiring as a practice within HR or employee engagement, anything like that. So specialists should ideally look for opportunities where their skills are of relevance and of importance. That becomes the core area that they bring to the table. So picking up the same example of an M&E expert, should look at organizations that have implementing programs, because wherever programs are being created and implemented, they will also be monitored and evaluated against for progress. Similarly, Researchers should look at research organizations, think tanks. They can also consider roles in internal research, knowledge management, depending on their interest areas. Whereas for generalists, I feel that they have a probably more like a broader stance at the kind of organizations or the kind of roles they can apply to. It comes down to how you're positioning yourself for a job. So typically generalists should try to identify the kind of jobs or maybe the kind of people, for example, that they want to work with, and position themselves as what are some core areas of skills that they bring to the table for a particular um, role within an organization that they're targeting, and how they can mold themselves to that area of work. Um, like I said, there is no right or wrong answer here. Any approach is a good approach as long as you are starting in a systematic way. There are ways that cross cut between specialists and generalists too. So you can take the opportunity route or the organization route, as long as you try, experiment, figure out what works for you, fix whatever is not working for you, and are able to progress in your job search process. So coming back to these two approaches being applied to the kind of organizations that exist in the sector, you can see how you want to target organizations and how you want to target roles and your skill set within these organizations. So for example, an M&E expert would be more valued in an organization like Pratham that has on-ground teams implementing their education programs in schools at a grassroots level. Whereas the same kind of skill can be modified to impact investment or grant making organizations that are monitoring the kind of progress their funding programs are getting. Similarly, consulting, if you have an interest area in a particular area, in a particular field, see what kind of organizations exist within the consulting domain and apply as a generalist with a subject matter expertise in a certain area, or with evidence of experience in that area, even if you are not a subject matter. If you are a young person who is still figuring out what your specialization is going to be, see how you want to position your generalist skills, your transferable skills into these roles. Look at the JD, position yourself accordingly. Again, this is just to give you an overview of a few examples of these different categories. This is again not exhaustive, and one can just build on this as they move forward. We will now talk a little bit about how we can leverage LinkedIn across these different approaches, how LinkedIn can come into play across these different types of organizations. I think at the very outset, what we need to understand is that people and connections are at the core of what creates LinkedIn as a successful platform. LinkedIn measures its success by how many people are signing up, how many people are creating networks, creating connections. So for building your network and connecting with the right people is a great tool to look for jobs. It is also useful when you are collaborating and reaching out to the network that you've built, and using that network to create opportunities for yourself, not just through the job boards and the job section on the LinkedIn page, but how can you kind of tap into the hidden job market that exists on LinkedIn. And lastly, also for your own personal branding and creating your own LinkedIn presence. It's the biggest professional network, and as a recruiter that has worked with multiple organizations in the impact sector, I know that the kind of job boards and different platforms that you have for job postings, they attract a certain level or a certain scale of candidates, but the kind of candidates who get jobs through LinkedIn, whether they are applying on their own or whether they're being headhunted, is the highest, especially for the social sector. So LinkedIn is a great tool for talent as well as employers, and we would be focusing more on how you as job seekers can use these three aspects of LinkedIn to get your next job. So once you have kind of like figured out an approach for yourself, whether you are identifying as a generalist or as a specialist or as something in between, you need to create a plan for yourself. So you pick an approach and you have to ask yourself the following questions, right? First, you ask yourself, what are some organizations that I wish to associate myself with and why? I think the why aspect of this question is extremely important because there could be multiple reasons for you to work with an organization, but there will be certain reasons that will appeal to you more than others. Someone might think highly of an organization because of the kind of work they're doing, the kind of impact they're creating. Someone might look up to the kind of brand proposition that they have in the country or globally. Someone might just look up to a certain leader within these organizations. And someone might want to apply it to organizations in a particular territory that goes beyond your metro cities. So these the reasons why you select an organization could be very wide, but pick the ones that appeals to you the most, and that will be a bit like your guiding force within your approach. The next question is, what are some similar organizations to the ones that I've listed in the first question? What this question really helps you do is think beyond what you aspire for. So your first question will give you like a list of top 10 that really excite you. But to be more realistic and to create more options, it's also important to have a list of the next best kind of organizations that you want to work with. In your job search, you are approaching things in a more structured and systematic way. And things are a lot in your control when you are applying for jobs. And I think most importantly, identifying critical stakeholders in these organizations. This would not just be people who are leading these organizations, but also peers in these organizations who are in roles that you aspire to be in. So identify the leadership teams, identify important decision makers, identify peers you'd like to connect with, you see yourself working with, or you see yourself playing similar roles. And also identify HRs, who are the HR teams of these organizations that will be facilitating the hiring process for you when you connect with these organizations. When you have identified people through these questions, through these organizations, you are all set to start connecting and building your network. So your LinkedIn network should be very targeted towards something that interests you, something that is of relevance to you, not just from what are your professional interests, but also what are some opportunities that can appear before me through this network. I've added an asterisk here because when you are to kind of highlight this aspect of LinkedIn. So whenever you're identifying the kind of organizations you want to work with, it's a good practice to go to that link, go to the LinkedIn page of that organization, start following it. And when you go to the job section of that organization's page, you will see something like this. I've just picked up JPAL as an example, but essentially every page has the option to create a job alert. So now whenever JPAL creates, puts a job or puts a job posting, I will get a notification on my personal LinkedIn. So through this method, not only am I setting myself up to go out there and take up opportunities and create opportunities, but I'm also in the background making space for opportunities to come to me. I think this creates a lot of options, and it happens parallelly, so it works very well. Once you have built your network, majority of your network is people who are relevant to you, to your professional network. You need to start engaging with them. And the best way forward is through cold messages. So once you have identified who these people are, you can start engaging with them through personal messages. You can look at what kind of conversations they are engaging with in their network and start engaging with that too. I think cold messaging is something that came up in our survey forms as well, where people talked about how they are unsure of whether it makes sense to send a cold message. Would it be worth anything? Would it lead to anything? How should they go about it? Because there is no other context. I think a lot of us tend to overthink about cold messages. I might personally think, I don't know this person, or this person is so senior, why would they have the time to look at my message? But I think we should keep those ideas and thoughts behind and just put ourselves out there a little. So keep your messages simple and direct. Don't think too much. A little goes a long way. I'm not going to say that every message you send will get a response. Some of the concerns that you have about people not having time to respond to messages might also be true. But I know that 1 in 10 or 1 in 20 cold messages will get some attention. And you don't know the way in which these messages can work in terms of starting a conversation. So the more you create these opportunities for starting conversations, getting noticed, I think the better it is. And it's a long shot, but it's just setting yourself up for future. So on the screen, I have a few examples of some cold messages that you can send out. Feel free to take a screenshot and use this as a framework. I've had examples for people for messages you can send to your peers in case you want to start a conversation with them and get their perspective on how things are. Um, a general message just when you're connecting with someone, when someone accepts your connection. HR teams or leaders who you might have engaged with and you want to send a follow-up message. I think these formats all work really well. I'm happy to also share this towards the end of the session. So once your network is built, and you have kind of like figured out how to identify these people, you have done the effort of at least doing your bit of starting conversations, you need to start working on your personal branding and how this network is perceiving you on LinkedIn. So as you start putting yourself out there are different ways and methods of doing this. One great way is to engage with content. LinkedIn has a feed where people are constantly talking about opportunities, what their work is, generally just talking about work in any shape and form. It's a good practice to engage with the content of your relevant network. So you can comment something, you can reshare posts and with your take or with your perspective. And again, there is no right or wrong answer. There is a lot of scope for creativity here. I thought this would be a good time to kind of share one LinkedIn post that I saw of a friend recently. So this is my friend from college who recently took the GMAT, and she has written this small piece about what her GMAT journey was. There are some things that come out here, right? I will move to the article as well. So she has put a post and also used LinkedIn's article resource. This will also reflect on her profile, so that further contributes to her personal branding. But I just want to take a moment to appreciate what it's like to just talk about your really tough journey with a very intimidating exam. She has mentioned how she struggled with it for 5 years, and I'm sure there are failures involved here. So being vulnerable is a great way of just having authentic conversations on your field. And if you see the kind of response she's got, people are able to relate to this a lot. It's not something I think I'll show you a little bit about her article. I'll just scroll through it. It's nothing fancy. It's very structured, very to the point. It's doing what it does. It's not giving out too much gyan. She's just helping people out who are likely to be in a similar boat. And I think this is a very easy and a great way of increasing your personal branding. And it is just something that she has experienced. So there is nothing like, she is not a GMAT expert. She has just talked about her own experience. She must have reflected on her entire journey, jotted a few things down, made an article about it, and posted it on LinkedIn. Obviously, it looks it sounds much easier when I explain it like this. I can imagine that there can be certain inertia. One might not want to talk about something so personal, but I think these are some certain things that really set you apart. And they also give you a reflection of what you are outside of work. A lot of time employers have strategies to figure out whether you are a good fit for a role or not from a skills, roles and responsibilities point of view. But these things, right, which really kind of reflect your personality, whether you're empathetic, these are really critical skills for employers, and employers are constantly struggling to crack them. I think a look at your LinkedIn profile can really create that balance of what you bring to the table from a professional skills core area of work point of view, as well as your personality that kind of complements your skills and makes you an ideal candidate. So yeah, use opportunities like these to kind of create your perfect LinkedIn profile. Other than this, there are also other options. You can join relevant groups. Many industries or many areas, specializations have their own groups. I know that there is a group for professionals in monitoring and evaluation, HR professionals, women in tech, and so on. Look up these relevant groups, join them. Conversations in these groups are often always about job opportunities. Someone is looking out, someone is looking to hire, someone is talking about recent trends and news updates. And it's a great way of being in touch with the larger community of people who are like you. This also gives you access to global groups. And I think that's a great opportunity to have a sense of what's happening in the larger point of view, right? Request recommendations. So you would have noticed on your LinkedIn profile towards the end, there's a space for your employer to give you recommendations on what it was like working with you. This is like, as an employer, from an employer's point of view, this is the quickest and the softest way to do a reference check. A lot of times these recommendations go a very long way. So request for recommendations, and also give recommendations, offer the same back to your peers, your colleagues, people you might have managed, people you might have worked with. And now we're also back to having conferences, having in-person meetups. A lot of news around the same is being advertised on LinkedIn. So if you're following the right people, if you're following the right organizations, you're highly likely to catch up on these opportunities and see whether it interests you. A lot of these opportunities to network in person will always be far more superior than networking on LinkedIn or online, because they're almost always instant. So look out for these opportunities as well. Some more tips as we approach the end of this session is I wanted to talk about some challenges that we experience in the entire end-to-end hiring process. These 4 areas of work were very prominent in our feedback survey. So I felt this might not be related to LinkedIn, but it's important to speak about it. When you start applying for jobs, be very clear on what is your purpose. Why are you applying for jobs? What is your big why? There is no harm in having a quick elevator pitch ready that helps you introduce yourself quickly, whether virtually or online or offline. So be very clear on what you bring to the table, but at the same time, have clarity on what it is that you are looking to gain from a job and organization. Why do you want to engage with someone or with an organization with someone from a particular organization or with an organization at large? This should be very clear to you. And do your homework. Research about everything there is to learn about an organization. I think something like this will give you clarity when you're creating that system of the kind of organizations you want to target, but also further in the process, in the interview process, knowing about where you're applying to goes a long way. CVs and cover letters are often the entering point of your profile into in the eyes of an HR or a hiring manager. So it's important that you are keeping your CV very crisp, very clean, ideally up to 2 pages. Use a format that's easy on the eyes, nothing too outrageous in terms of formats. One big point here that we tend to miss out on is that we have one standardized CV that we use to apply to all opportunities. And I think LinkedIn has a feature that enables this bad habit. There is an option to quick apply, where if you upload your CV once, you can just use the same CV at the click of a button and apply for a job. As a recruiter who posts jobs on LinkedIn to attract candidates, I can assure you that in the first 15 minutes, we get up to 100 applications. And of those 100 applications, probably I would find only 4 or 5 relevant. So remember that when you're applying to jobs on LinkedIn, there are thousands of applications that are being received. How do you make sure that your CV is standing out? So this is where JDs are extremely important. Use the JD as a guiding force. Read what are the roles and responsibilities that are crucial to that opportunity, and try to kind of align your experience in the same terms, in the same language that the JD is using to describe the opportunity. So ideally, every job that you apply to should not only have a different cover letter, but also a different CV. As recruiters, we use filters on LinkedIn when we're filtering through the CVs that we receive through job posts on LinkedIn. And we don't see every CV. It's humanly impossible to look at every CV. We try combinations of filters to look at keywords, to look at experience levels, make sure that everything that you are giving to a job post is aligned by the job description. And this goes out even for opportunities that you might be applying to through organizations' websites. So aligning your CV and your experience, even when you are having an interview, through to the job description and to the larger goals of the organization is extremely important. Interviews are the next stage of the hiring process. Again, going back to research, do your homework, talk to people and research all that there is to know about the organization and the role. Ideally, you should know more about the role and the organization than your interviewer. Interviews are also opportunities for you to kind of like fill in certain gaps that you might have discovered in your research. So if you, while doing your research, you realize that you don't have clarity on something, interviews are the best way to fill in that gap. But make sure that you come across as someone who has done research, found a gap, and you're positioning it as a gap and not as a lack of knowledge on your part. So use interviews to not just flex on your strengths, but also you are also using that opportunity to interview your potential future employer. Figure out logistics. Interviews are now happening online and offline. Some organizations also invite applicants to different sites, field sites. Figure out what are your logistics going to be. Be on time. If you're doing it virtually, make sure that you have a stable internet connection, a room that has no disturbances or distractions. If you're doing it offline, make sure you know where you're going, reach on time. If you are flying out or you are traveling for this for an interview, make sure that the logistics are arranged for by the organization. And most importantly, be yourself. During interviews, it's very important that you bring your authentic self to the table, because often at times you don't want to oversell or undersell yourself. Employers are looking for certain aspects of your profile that are not on your CV, that are not even on the JD. The unsaid things about applications, the unsaid things about hiring are often communicated between the interactions that happen on a one-on-one level. Finally, salary negotiation and offer, which is probably the most intimidating part of the entire process. I think the biggest advice here is to be as communicative as possible. Set expectations as early as possible. So from the very first touch point that you have with an organization, whether it is on email or through a conversation, make sure that you're asking questions if you have certain gaps in it of information on salary, title, etc. If you have certain financial goals or certain negotiables, non-negotiables, it's best to communicate that from the very beginning. A lot of times things fall apart or things don't materialize on something like a number or a title towards the very end of the process, when everyone involved has invested a lot of time and energy. And it's very disappointing for everyone involved when things don't work out over something that could have been figured out at the very beginning, whether it is something that you problem solve for or whether it is something that you change courses of action. It can be done. If it can be done sooner, then it should be done sooner. Next, I think it's also important that you go in with an open mind. Don't lose sight of the larger picture. Salaries and financials are extremely important, but they are not everything. They don't constitute. They are not the only two constituents of an opportunity. You must also consider what is the work, whether it interests you, whether it contributes to your growth. How much are you willing to compromise on one over the other? Sometimes a title is a non-negotiable. So if you're getting a title, do you want to compromise a little bit on the salary? If you don't want to compromise on the salary, is there something else that you can basically find a middle ground for? And yeah, like I mentioned, be very direct in your communication. Try to have an email trail for all of these conversations so that there is no scope for error or ambiguity towards the end.
Before we move on to the question and answer session, I would just want to take up 1 minute to explain the Women at Work initiative, and also to share that We are curating more such masterclasses for you to complement the one we just had with Ridhika. She did touch upon a few elements of personal branding and also how to approach the interview process. And also, one other important aspect is how to cope with rejections and failures during the job search process, because that could take a lot of toll on your emotional well-being as well. So we are curating sessions that would address all of these different aspects of job search, and all of these are exclusively for women, because at Women at Work we aspire to make the development sector more inclusive and conducive for women to join, grow and lead the workforce. So all the master classes that we're curating are done in line with this thought process only. So yeah, I think we can move on to the Q&A.
Yeah.
Before I think we can take up the questions from chat box,
Yeah,
Ritika,
let's take
because
that first, and then maybe Amrita, you've raised your hand, you can unmute and go next.
yeah.
Right. So we have one question on those coming back to the workforce after a long break. This is by Barsha. Thank you a lot, Barsha, for sharing this question. This is a very important topic. And even when we were designing this session, I was having a lot of conversations internally with my team, with the recruitment team, to figure out what is the best way to approach this, because it can be quite a challenge, and understandably so. I think at the offset, a lot of these techniques that we have discussed today do stand for those who are coming back to the workforce after a break for whatever reason, right? In our experience, impact sector organizations are not as particular about breaks in their CV. I think they don't reject people outrightly just because of a break. I think they do dwell deeper into those gaps. So use those opportunities to kind of have a sense of why you took a break and things like that. Be communicative about it. Use your cover letter. Always attach a cover letter if this is the case with your CV to the organizations. And I think more than the traditional job search process where you are, whatever we have discussed right now, networking is extremely important for situations like these. What gets communicated virtually on an email or text or through a CV cannot even compare with the kind of conversations one has with the other, especially if you're talking to fellow women. So I think be very patient in this process. You are unfortunately, it's not the same process for you as it would be for someone who currently has a job and is just looking to switch, but use opportunities to connect with others. Look at people who might have had career breaks and have now gotten back to career. Look at people's LinkedIn profiles and connect with them to understand how they navigated this. There are also now I think there are also some job platforms specifically designed for women who are getting back to the workforce, whether it is after a maternity break or any other sort of break. So I think lots of opportunities there. But yes, this is definitely something that needs to be talked about more. We have considered this and we will be covering it in our future master classes as well. I'm going to pick up Shubhangi's question. Shubhangi comes from a political science background and currently working with political consultancy, wants to switch to the impact sector. I wanted to know the importance of case interviews and how to prepare for them. So ideally, if not every organization, first of all, has a case interview, but I agree that every organization has their own unique hiring process. The best way to go about this is connecting with different people in the organization while you are still in the hiring process. Also, there is no harm in asking your HR or your hiring manager also about how to prepare specifically for something like this. If you position yourself as hi, how can I prepare for this, the next stage of the process, they would be more than willing to help you out with some starting points, and try to get a sense of what you're walking into. So you would definitely be able to find knowledge on what a case interview is going to look like in your particular case, right, Shubhangi? So if it is like a political consultancy, if there is a case related to that, you'll have more context that is relevant to your subject area. But if I have to give you a sense of broadly, or like a broad hiring process, a lot of times people have assignments that are relevant to the job that they're applying for. Sometimes people also have like a personality test or an aptitude test, which is fairly general and easy to crack. But when you are going for, say, for example, a curriculum lead role, they will give you an assignment to create a lesson plan. So they will give you context to what the assignment is, and then use your network while you're solving the assignment to get a sense of how you can prepare for it or how you should go approach it. I think that would be my approach to this. I hope this is helpful. What are some of the key aspects to be considered while asking your referees for references? So, Niharika, assuming that you are looking at references in the reference check process for a job, typically an organization will ask for 2 to 3 references. I think they have to be of the people you have reported to, people who have monitored your work. So have that kind of relationship with your boss from the very first day, where you know that they would have your back when you want to move on to a new process, when you want to move on to a new job. There are times when things might not be as rosy. You might not be living under the best circumstances, and you fear that your boss might not give you a best reference. I think at that time, it's important that you set context to your future employer so that they also get a sense of the context in which you're leaving and joining them. And by the time you have reached a reference check process, the organization is very keen on hiring you. This is a formality that they have to take across so that there is no flag in the process. So even when you give context to an employer, they will also ask questions that are more related to your work product and your personality at work. And if things are getting too personal, even the employer will have the judgment to kind of like know the difference. This happens with us. This has happened with us recently, where we knew that somebody who was leaving to join us was not leaving their current organization in the best circumstances, and we kind of we were judging the candidate more on the kind of interactions that we've had with them in the hiring process, which was lots of conversations and an assignment, and not only basing our decision off them on that reference check. So trust the process also, I would say. I would pause on the chat. I think our questions in the chat are increasing. Amrita had raised her hand. Please feel free to unmute yourself.
Yeah, hi, Ridhika. Thanks for the session. My question was, I'm a generalist, and the kind of jobs I'm looking for also in that segment. So, I have a lot of things on my CV, the certifications, my education, and long academic background, and it's how do I keep it crisp? Like it's stretching onto more than 2 pages now, and
Okay.
yeah, like
Okay.
sometimes it's even though I'm applying for one job, right? But even the jobs I'm applying for would require a range of skills and experience. So how do I put all of that together?
Absolutely. I think this is a very common problem, and the more experience you gain, the more you find it difficult to condense your experience. But I would go back to the point where you're kind of highlighting core aspects of your present stint, and maybe like the stint before your present one, in that is aligned with the job description that you're applying to. You would have to take a call on letting go of some information also, and saving that not on your CV but in conversations that follow, or maybe inserting them in your cover letter. So I think it's a balancing act in this case. Take a call of removing some information, removing certifications that are not relevant to the current role, and adding them to your cover letter instead. I think that's what I would say. And if you think that it is not doing justice, then it's probably fine. Like it is 2 pages is ideal, but for some experiences or some profiles, it is understandable if your experience cannot be cramped in 2 pages. So you don't even want that.
Thank you.
How to manage salary negotiation, salary expectations when it comes to switching from a for-profit role?
Sure. So what is the best way to set expectations when you're switching from for-profit to not-for-profit? Is that right? Okay. Honestly, like these are calls. There is obviously a very clear compromise here, right? You are wanting to switch to the sector because maybe the work or the impact is appealing to you. And you are wanting to switch to another job because you want a salary hike. You are catering to your financial goals. I think these are calls one has to take. There will be times when if you are chasing impact that is only being done by a non-profit, they will only be able to pay you so much. but there is no harm in expressing this concern to your employer too, so that you and your new whatever potential future employer can work towards strategies that kind of create win-win situations for everyone involved. So if you're looking at a hike, but that hike is not as good as whatever, right? If you're taking a pay cut to join, then what is the extent to which you're taking a pay cut? Can you look at creating systems with your employer where you receive a hike or two hikes over a period of years, so that eventually your financial goals are met over a period of year? And this can be against performance goals, etc. So I think my first advice would be to probably work together, collaborate with your employer to understand what is the wiggle room, right? Can you create win-win situations for everyone? Finally, I think, again, coming back to the same point, like decide what is more important to you. I personally feel it is unfair to pick between two, right? Financials are also equally important. And it's not that just because you're working in the sector does not mean you don't have needs. You still have stomachs to fill and so on. Can you look at the kind, if the impact or the purpose of an organization is appealing to you, can you look for organizations that are in social enterprises or on the funding side of organizations where salaries might not be as low? I think it requires a lot of thinking, processing, collaborating with others. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And the second one was from Rashi, and the question is there a way you suggest to get a referral from a peer or someone working in a similar position you aspire for in the organization that you want to enter? And the second one, she has another question. What is the ideal time to follow up for an application? Like once you applied and you're not hearing back from the employer, what is the time one should allow before following up?
Got it. I think I'll get to the second one first. So I understand this is a very big problem that you apply, but you don't hear back. Somebody else also in the chat had mentioned that they have they've done all this, right? They have customized their CV, cover letter, but they still don't hear back. On behalf of the HR community, I would like to say that we receive too many applications at times, and it is humanly impossible for us to reply back to all. At the very best, we might have a tool that automatically replies to every application we get, which kind of like gives us a mental tick mark that we have acknowledged someone's application, but it still doesn't solve the problem. So it is a difficult challenge on the employer end for an HR person or a hiring manager to reply to everything. But in your position as a job seeker, you are in the right when you have to follow up. I think a week is a good enough time for a follow up. And one or two times, following up one or two times is reasonable. If you're not hearing back after that also, then there's a good chance that the conversation is being headed in a different direction. So be realistic, don't latch on to something for too long. Again, like create opportunities where you're following up on multiple places rather than just one and waiting to hear back on that before moving on to the next one. The first question was whether there is a way to get a referral from a peer for a certain position. Yeah, I think some organizations do have referral programs too, but I don't think they're advertised externally. These are things that are advertised internally. So the more you connect with people and network with peers in your peers with jobs that you aspire for, you will get to know of these things, and ask people, like ask them if there is a way they can refer you. I also mentioned that in one of the slide on cold messages, I mentioned a way to kind of plug in your CV through the HR. So that is also one of the ways where you can, it's not a direct referral, but you can plug in your CV through them too. But always a good practice to connect with peers who are in jobs that you would aspire to, and engaging with them, having conversations with them, understanding what it's like to work in that job. How did they get that job? I think these kind of caveats, referral program, for example, is something that you get to know through these conversations.
Yeah, I think this was a great session, and thank you, Ridhika, for sharing very practical frameworks and tips that we can implement and also measure the success rate as we approach the job search journey, as we are in the job search journey. Thank you for that. And once again, thank you to all of you for taking out time on a Friday evening. And yeah, we are very super proud that you chose us, and thank you. Keep attending and stay tuned to Arthan's future masterclasses as well. Thank you. Bye.